I say a lot of words.
Yeah.
And I'm saying the word now, which is let's focus on the bill. You can call me whatever you like afterwards, all right?
The implication was that I was racist by saying that. Now, you could call, see, we just got a shake of the head. The fact is, are they here legally or not? Did they go through our immigration system or not?
If some of them are, first off, these children did not consciously break any law. The subjects of this legislation did not consciously break any law. I think every law in this country is subject to somebody consciously breaking it.
That wasn't my question at all. Did they come here
Well,
legally?
you're asking me if these children did something illegally.
So, in other words, so the children should get the DREAM Act, but the parents that came in illegally should not?
We're talking about this is applying to the children.
I'm sorry?
The DREAM Act is applying to the children. This is talking about young people who came before a certain age.
18 to 21. What if somebody's 18 years old? They came in illegally. They, not their children. Do they get this?
Let me ask you this. Does it benefit
the
U.S. to marginalize somebody?
That's answering a question with a question.
Huh?
You answer my question,
yes,
I'll answer yours.
That is a young person.
That is a young person, so it had nothing to do with the children. So that's another canard.
I would consider that a child, 18 years old.
How about 21?
After 21, they're not permitted to do this.
21.
And as an American citizen, do I think that an educated 21-year-old who came here, who's earning and contributing to society, benefits me as a U.S. citizen? Yes.
Sure it does. You're pivoting and twisting, though. That's not my question.
I would be hurting U.S. citizens by marginalizing.
I understand you don't want to answer the question because you can't. Does a 21-year-old who broke into this country, came in illegally?
Yes, because the regressive immigration system
came in illegally,
led to partially to his status.
If they came in illegally through Mexico, do they get the benefits of the DREAM Act as a 21-year-old? Because it has nothing to do with their children. It's them.
If
yes
they came
or no?
Here, I would defer to, if they come here at 21?
I'm just
I don't know
upset
the answer
to tell
that
you
question.
the time has lapsed.
That is called Saved by the Bell.
Ms. Glick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise in support of this measure, largely on the basis that it makes all the economic sense in the world for us to provide access for young people who have been through our school system. You're required to have been in our high schools for at least 2 years, but many of the youngsters have been through our entire K through 12 system. We pay for that. We pay for that because we're required to pay for that. So some of these youngsters are the stars of their high schools. They've done great work. But now we're going to turn around and say, you know what? You're actually doing so much better work than the other 25 kids in the school, in your class rather, but they can apply for tuition assistance, but you can't. We are cutting our nose to spite our face. These young people here through no fault of their own. I'll tell you something. When I was 18, if my parents told me to go somewhere, I went. I didn't really have a lot of choices. They told me we're going here, and that was it. But I was going to see my friends, too bad. Get in the car. So I will tell you that this is about continuing our investment in the future of young people who have something to contribute to our society. And they're not going back to a country they don't know. They're not picking up stakes and going, you know what? Where did we come from? You know, I could have asked my parents. It would have been a very complicated answer. The grandparents, they came from here. This one came from there. Where the hell am I supposed to go? So we are a nation of immigrants. It's what's been our strength. And the notion that there actually are some immigrants that, should they arrive here from, say, Cuba, they're actually like, oh, that's okay. That's like fine. Like, come on in. It's all right. So it is our obligation not to be stupid. It's getting harder, apparently, in public discourse, but it is our obligation as elected officials to look at the amount of money we have invested in young people and say, you know what? We're going to allow them access to the same thing as their classmates because many of them may be more talented than their classmates. And we don't do a test. We don't say tuition assistance, oh, only if you have a 92 and your SAT is thus and so. We say if you're eligible based on family income, we will provide you this amount of resources. And these are youngsters who have to have gone to our schools, and many of them, as I have said before, have done very well. So it is really in the interest of the investment we have already made to ensure that these youngsters can fulfill their next level of education to, I always say, my job as chair of higher ed is to make sure that everyone who goes to school can become the biggest taxpayer in the state of New York, because we want you to be successful. And you get successful by getting an education. And so the important thing is for us to ensure that these youngsters have access to the same supports that everyone else that they've been going to school with, everyone that is sitting in, we don't do the go into the hall and separate people and say, you all can apply, but not you. We don't do that. We shouldn't do that. It's a very bad image for people like me. That separation, you know, is a very pernicious and negative thing. So this is about economic common sense. We've invested in these young people. We should allow them to have the same access to the supports that their classmates have, because it will be better for us as a state. We don't want kids to just finish high school, especially if they're the smart ones in the class. What the heck does that do for us? So I'm suggesting that we look at the investment we've made and say, you know what? We're going to continue to allow you to have the same access as your classmates, because you know what? It's common sense. An awful lot of the, oh, it's not politically correct, or you can't say this, or you can't say that. People get annoyed because they just think we should be following common sense, and common sense says if we've been paying for these kids to go to school and we are obligated to do so, then they should have the same access to the supports that make it possible for them to continue their education. So I would urge people to get back on track with what exactly are we doing and how important it is for our economic future to make this minor investment so that these youngsters can stay in New York, contribute to New York, and we're not sure what happens. They may become the person who follows a biochemistry course and discovers something that is a huge benefit to all of us. So let's not be short-sighted and let's not be stupid about it. Let's be supportive of something that is continuing an investment that for many, I mean, most of these youngsters actually haven't been here for 2 years. They've been here for longer. But even if they are only here for 2 years, they can't walk in the door. They have to go to our high schools. They have to be, I think it's 2 years they have to have attended a high school in the state of New York. And that is an expense. We've already invested. Depending on what school district you're in, you've actually made quite a decent investment. especially on Long Island. So let's do the common sense thing that humanity asks of us. Not to be short-sighted, not to be small-minded. Let the Empire State be expansive, and let us do the humane thing, the thing that we are called to do as a way of lifting people up, not slamming a door in their face. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Ms. Arroyo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to add something here, and it's the fact that we are ignoring. I think that we are smart people. That's why our communities vote for us to be here. The contribution that these people that are called illegal immigrants had made to this society and to this country is a great one. And the only thing that we are doing here is telling those children that came here because somebody brought them, you will have an opportunity like everybody else to be educated and to be prepared to continue in this country. I think that I'm going to make a comment that somebody's not going to like. Illegal immigrants are not all Mexicans. What happened with Mexicans that everybody is attacking them? It's in the media every day. It's in the national campaign. Mexicans, Mexicans, Mexicans. Mexicans did not cross the border. The border crossed them because part of the country belonged to them and was taken away from them. As a Puerto Rican, I feel offended when I hear an attack in another Hispanic group. What we are doing today is justice to a group that everybody is attacking, but getting the benefits that they are putting here in this country with the little salaries that they get paid, and some of them have to work 4 or 5 jobs in order to pay rent and support their family. And we look to the other side, oh, they're illegal immigrants. What about our great-grandparents? I think that I congratulate the sponsor of the bill. I vote yes for it. And I want to add again, don't offend us, because what is going on in this nation is something that is disgusting.
Mr. Crespo.
Pass me that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the bill?
On the bill, sir.
This is not the first time we debate this bill, and I've expressed in the past, and I'll continue to reiterate that this legislation makes both moral, in my opinion, and economic sense for a number of reasons. And I commend the sponsor for his diligence and commitment. I commend the chairwoman of the Higher Education Committee for her support and for her, always championing this issue of opportunity for children, and the Speaker for continuing to make this a priority of this House. Some of the comments that have been made and some of the questions that are asked target the actions of the adults without focusing on what the legislation is intended to do, which is to really provide opportunity to children. That has been said, we make an investment in, participate in our school systems, excel academically, which is a requirement to be able to apply for the tuition assistance, and meet all of the other criteria. I think what is unfortunate is to send a disingenuous message about what the bill does or doesn't do. First of all, this takes absolutely nothing away from an eligible citizen student from applying and getting the same benefit. This takes nothing from anyone else. To say anything different is a misrepresentation, a mischaracterization characterization of the bill. Second, to get into discussions about immigration reform, I think we all agree, and it's been said from both sides of the aisle, that the federal government really needs to act. But when we're going to use, we got to be consistent in what we say and what we do. And if we're going to use terms like illegal to describe someone who's here, maybe outside of the scope of the law, we reference it technically correct as undocumented, but somebody wants to insist on using the word illegal, then I would encourage you to be consistent about the use of that word. Anybody, if you're going to say that somebody who commits a violation of the law should be termed illegal, then by all definitions that we have an illegal presidential candidate who has been known to hire undocumented workers, what has been rightly pointed out is not allowed by federal law, and yet there are many Americans who support that individual's ascension to the top position in this country. We want to dwindle that down to the average parent, maybe, who hires an undocumented worker to take care of their lawn, or maybe even take care of their children in the household. I haven't heard those that are concerned about actions of immigration, apprehension and deportation of those who came here illegally, but say nothing of those that benefit from the work of those individuals. We take that further, and for some of those who have raised concerns about this bill represent farmers whose farms would have been closed by now if not for the undocumented workers who keep those farms operational. I don't know if those same members have supported the Farm Worker Bill of Rights to protect those workers. Or, you know what, I could take it further and talk about the CEOs who commit all sorts of negligent, illegal actions, benefit financially, and the only thing they're required to do is pay a fine, but continue to operate. As a matter of fact, we've done things to give those same businesses credit, because what would happen to those communities if those businesses closed? All I'm asking for is consistency in your message and your thought about what we're trying to do. We are a nation of immigrants, yes. All of us can trace our ancestry back. And has been pointed out, and it is true, there was a point in time when some communities from some parts of the world benefited from our lax immigration laws. When the demographics of those seeking opportunities changed, so did our immigration laws. Yes, there's an imbalance there. As a Puerto Rican, we're now dealing with the ramifications of what happens when our country's laws are inconsistent with American citizens. And I would ask you to study what's happening in Puerto Rico as an example of this dynamic, where we don't treat people fairly in this country. All we're saying in this bill, and if we focus on what we're trying to do in this legislation, is tell young people who we've already made an investment in, who are excelling academically, who know no other place but home, who pledge allegiance to this flag, who call New York State home, who speak our language, who pay taxes. Because if we want to be consistent, then if you don't believe they should be working to be here, then return the $500 million in state income taxes and taxes that undocumented New Yorkers have paid. We don't give them their money back. We use it, and guess what? We use it to keep farms open, to keep companies open in this state. All we're saying is, with all of the billions of dollars that we spend, that we are realistic about the intellectual capital of young people who are in our schools already, who we are investing in already, to let them continue that education, to use their skills to move our country forward. I would even argue that I would like to see less visas given to specialty workers who come in, take advantage of those jobs, and then leave knowing they're going to leave. I would rather make that investment in somebody who's here to stay, because they've been here all along and don't even know the so-called country that some would like to see them deported to. So let's just focus on what we're trying to do. This is about fairness. This is about treating children regardless of what part of the world they're from, and giving them the opportunities that we so gallantly claim. And so, some folks, like to use nice terminologies. I have horrible memory, so don't ask me what the Statue of Liberty says. But I know what it means and what it represents, and it represents opportunity for those that are denied opportunities elsewhere. If we truly believe in that history, then let's continue that tradition by passing the DREAM Act.
Mr. Pichardo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield for a few questions?
Mr. Moyer, will you yield?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Moyer yields.
Thank you, Mr. Moya. I see that you're very active in your district, and following you on Facebook, when you go visit schools in your district, is there any discernible way that you can tell when you talk to the students in any of the schools in your district whether one is undocumented or not?
No.
Okay. Does the teacher, when you have conversations with them or with the administrators, that they separate lists and create these kids are undocumented, these kids are documented, do they get different services, same services, or separated services?
They get the same services.
Can I ask you, do you know who Cesar Vargas is, Mr. Moya? Can you tell our colleagues who Cesar Vargas is?
Cesar Vargas is a dreamer, the Mexican descendant of Mexico, came here to this country, undocumented, went through the public school system, graduated, and became now an attorney. First to become an undocumented student to not only graduate law school, but pass the bar exam here in the state of New York.
So it's fair to say that Mr. Vargas, when given the opportunity, not only did he excel in his field, but is paying back not only in state income taxes, federal income taxes, but also helping out his community. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you tell me, Mr. Moya, who Ethan Couch is?
You'd have to remind me.
Mr. Couch was a young man who mowed down 4 individuals in the state of Texas while drunk and did not serve a day in jail. Legal U.S. citizen living in the state of Texas and did not serve a day in jail. Why? People say because he was under the form of affluenza. And people can say that he broke the law and destroyed 4 families and an entire community and is not a contributing member of society and probably had more opportunity, more resources than any of us here in this chamber. Is that correct, sir?
Correct.
So that's pretty much it. Thank you, Mr. Moya. On the bill, Mr. Speaker.
On the bill, Mr. Pichardo.
So I've heard the discussion, and I've been privileged to serve in this body for the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, we've brought this bill up at least a few times in the last few years. It doesn't preclude anybody, regardless of where you start, but if you're given the opportunity to serve this country, either through military service, through your community, through academic pursuits, you're able to be a contributing member of society, not just paying in tax receipts, not just being an active member, but also being a family person, someone who's a positive contributing member of society. This bill, again, does not necessarily reward the parents of said undocumented immigrants, but it gives these kids who grew up in this country, who do not know any other country than the United States as their home, the opportunity to thrive like Mr. Vargas, who right now is a contributing member of society and who is participating in a way that not only helps individuals, not only around the state of New York, but is an example for this entire country that when immigrants come, for the most part, who do the right thing, who contribute to society, given the opportunity, will do the right thing. So when we turn it and flip side, when we have individuals like Mr. Couch who flaunt the law, who've destroyed lives, and are U.S. citizens, and are given more opportunities than anybody else, and they squander that away. So the fact that someone who's characterized that is undocumented is automatically morally corrupt versus someone who's actually a U.S. citizen and is not morally corrupt, I think there's a disconnect there. I respectfully disagree with my colleagues who believe that if we pay $27 million out of a $154.6 billion budget in the state of New York, that it's going to take basically rob Peter to pay Paul. This isn't a zero-sum game. The more people that we have in the pool contributing, the more money there is to go around. The more people that we have contributing, the bigger the pool is. And on top of that, we cannot tell, and I believe one of my colleagues said this earlier, we cannot make a difference by law to deprive students from K to 12 education, and we're already paying for it. So it doesn't make sense that as soon as they hit that cliff of 12th grade, whether or not they're valedictorians, whether or not they're stars of their football, basketball, baseball teams, chess classes, anything like that, that they're not those stars, and that because they did the right thing and they worked hard for whatever they're able to achieve, because of some decision that their parent made that they're not eligible for either TAP money, scholarships, or anything like that. I think it's very short-sighted. But ultimately, what I want to get to in this bill, and I think, is to spur the federal government to get off their butts and actually do something on the issue of comprehensive immigration reform, and we can have a very, very serious conversation. I think what's happening right now on the national level is buffoonish, it's clownish, and it doesn't help the problem. It just simply has people waving their arms in the air uncontrollably and having an individual who couldn't tell you the first thing about what actually makes this country work. With all due respect, I had the opportunity to work for our U.S. Senator, Charles Schumer, when we were talking about passing comprehensive immigration reform. And I was in conversations with my colleagues, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side, and what we really tried to push was this idea to have a fully bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform. We were able to engage in conversations and compromise a lot in the bills that made some of the progressives unhappy, but thought that we would make some of the conservatives come along and say, this is the best that we're going to get and deal with this issue. And unfortunately, we did not have dancing partners on the other side. And to this day, because those conversations basically fell apart, we did not have the opportunity to pass comprehensive immigration reform, so we wouldn't be having this conversation now in the state. And the federal government has neglected its responsibility to deal with this issue. Now it's going to the states to deal with this issue. I commend the sponsor for being a leader on this bill and making sure that not only the children of his district, but the children of my district have the opportunity to learn, thrive, and be contributing members of society. And with that, Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for allowing me to speak on this bill.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tatone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the bill, please.
The bill, Mr. Tatone.
Thank you. I just want to first, we're here in Albany today. We're celebrating Italian-American heritage. Being married to an Italian immigrant, I think, it's important, number one, to bring up that this piece of legislation doesn't benefit just one group of immigrants, but all. And then earlier there was a debate, an exchange going on, and the question came up several times, well, what laws changed, what laws changed? And I want to remind this body that there, not all, but many, many immigrants that are here in this country came here, quote unquote, legally, and then we had the attack on the World Trade Center on this country on September 11th. And our Congress then passed the Patriot Act. And within that Patriot Act, many of these immigrants who were here, quote unquote, legally, who brought their children, well, the goalposts have changed for them. Suddenly they were in a spot where they were now, quote unquote, illegal. And we have not adjusted or fixed that. So it's unfair, in my opinion, to start blaming these people who set up their homes here, and we, our Congress, at our behest, changed the goalposts on them, thus creating the undocumented or illegal. And again, we're talking about children. Many of these children couldn't even tell you what their hometown looks like. That's how young they were when they were brought here. These are the kids who go to our schools and pledge allegiance to our flag. So, the argument has been made that somehow we're taking something away from Americans and giving it to the quote-unquote illegals, which is not true. But I want to point out, too, the economic argument. This bill will cost us, less than $1 a person. That's 86 cents per person to implement. And for that 86 cents, we get a tax-paying, what's the word I'm looking for? Bonanza, because, if someone graduates high school, they're going to make X amount of dollars. They graduate college, they're going to be earning 25% more than had they not. And that increases their tax base, and which increases our tax base. So, I just want to once again reiterate, that for many of our undocumented neighbors here in the state, they came here illegally, and it was our Congress back in 2001 that shifted the goalpost on them. So, this is a fair bill. I wasn't planning on speaking about it today, but here I am. And Mr. Speaker, again, I commend the sponsor of this bill, and I look forward to voting for it yet again.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was exactly 4 years ago, 2012, where Mr. Moyer led a group of us into the governor's second floor office. In that meeting, Mr. Moyer brought up the DREAM Act. And the governor, who I hope, my dear good friend and governor, that you're watching what's happening here, you could have taken care of this 4 years ago. You gave SUNY over $50 billion. You could have given us just some $27 million, not to take care of the needs of over 1 million so-called undocumented people in this country. That's not what we were talking about 4 years ago. The governor has the power to write a check, just like he did for SUNY. Well, let's be clear. This is only about maybe 7,000 students whose parents maybe brought them here at the age of 3, 5, or 10, or even 15. They know no other country but this one, the land of the home of the brave, the land of the free, and the land of opportunity. That's what we say all over this country, that we are the land that was chosen by God. Speaking about God, I hardly go to church, but I went to church yesterday. And when I heard that if you do what's right, let your conscience be your guide, you will find that when you leave this planet, you will find your way to heaven. I said, what? I have flashback, having read somewhere that God created this earth. God gave us our heaven on earth. He gave each and every one of us a home without any walls, any barriers. He had Africans in Africa. He had Hispanics. Oh, not Hispanic yet. Let me correct myself. But prior to 1492, or in 1492, Columbus landed in one of our islands. And it was maybe less than 200 years later, 1620, that a group of people were lost in the high sea. And just like the indigenous people in the Caribbean welcomed with open arms those who were escaping or looking for a new road to wherever they were going, or those who landed in Plymouth Rock that were looking for a new home free of oppression. And the indigenous people in Massachusetts, Plymouth Rock, welcomed them with open arms. There were no barriers. I'm getting carried away? You bet I am. Because what I believe is that with the hype going on in this country, this is not the last time we're going to hear this. God gave us our own heaven on earth. It was some godly people that disrupted God's work and brought African Americans into this country, in other parts of the Caribbean. Ungodly people. We didn't ask for this. We only asked for justice for 7,000 students who want to be like you and all of us. And my brother, Phil Ramos, is wrong. But he's right. I am not an immigrant. I'm a migrant. Because after all, You all made me an American citizen in 1917, so my people can be drafted and brought to war and fight in every war. But today, what my leader said here, he didn't complete what he said. Marco Cuesta. Right now, Puerto Ricans and Puerto Ricans have been treated and still being treated worse than immigrants, worse than third-class citizens. Why? The debate going on here is going on in the Washington, D.C. Puerto Rico is owed $73 billion. It doesn't matter that we die in every one of the wars protecting democracy. No American citizen in Puerto Rico health benefit right now. Worse, American soldiers living in Puerto Rico are not entitled to any benefit right now because we're bankrupt. Are you talking to me about $27 million for some youngsters who want to be like us in a land of the free, land of opportunity? That's all we're talking about. Governor, it's your fault. You can still straighten this out. You can write the check. Obama, it's your fault. You can write a check just like you did for Wall Street and erase the debt that Puerto Rico supposedly owes. Both of you guys are at fault. I know you put it up with me. Let me tone down. This is simple. I just hope this debate don't carry on because there's someone that the way that he's speaking continues to divide this country, continue to say I will build a wall higher than Obama has built. Obama built that wall. George Bush started building that wall. Got to be careful because someone running for president said he's going to make Mexico pay for a longer wall. I'm one of those who say Mexico should pay for a wall with the original borders around the United States and keep the 13 colonies where they originated from. Build the wall that used to be the United States of Mexico, and we took 11 states from them. So let's be careful because we're all getting carried away. No one is a racist. We're just getting caught in the emotion of the arguments and the sickness that's going around as we hear all this debate taking place. So be careful because we don't know how far we're going to go with this before the general election. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rivera for a second time. Mr. Ramos for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield just for one question?
Mr. Moyer, will you yield?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Based on this bill, a young person would have to spend 2 years in high school? Is that the way it is?
Correct.
Or they would be?
Correct. They have to be here in the state of New York for 2 years, graduate from a high school, and then they would have a time period of, after graduation, 5 years before they can actually apply.
All right. So, and that's my point. The question was asked, based on this bill, somebody can come here at 21 and just get this benefit, and that is, in fact, not the truth, right? Based on this bill, you cannot come here at 21 years of age and be eligible. You must be a young person in high school.
Correct. You have to be here 2 years, have to graduate, and you have 5 years from that graduation period before you can between the 5 years to actually apply for tuition.
Thank you, Mr. Moyer.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect immediately.
Clerk will record the vote. Mr. Ortiz to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also would like to thank the sponsor of this piece of legislation and also the Speaker for allowing this bill to come to the floor. And I will be remiss if I don't thank also the chair of the higher education. I know that this bill had come here many times now, and I would like just to add to the equation of all the conversation that has been taking place that this piece of legislation has been passed in states such as Utah, Texas, Florida, New Mexico, a state where Republican control has the power to even to overturn this piece of legislation. So I put that on the table because it's fascinating for me to hear both sides of the aisle having an emotional conversation about the way we as an individual and human beings feel about this piece of legislation. I hope that the governor is listening very cautiously about the debate that took place this time in this House, because he can be the lead person to make sure that this legislation can come to reality as he continues to negotiate the next 7 days or 6 days that we have sectioned here in the Capitol, because we should not come back next year to debate the same piece of legislation. I think enough is enough to ensure that this bill will become to be a reality in the Senate. So I'm calling on the governor to work with the Senate, to work with the Assembly to make sure that this bill will become a law, and many folks throughout the state of New York will benefit from this piece of legislation. Last but not least, Mr. Speaker, I had 3 little girls who graduated this year from the high school in my district. The 3 happen to be undocumented. The 3 of them happen to be admitted to Harvard University. And the 3 of them, their dream is, one is to become a psychiatrist, the other one is to become a neuroscience, and the last one is to become a biochemistry. So we hope that their dream can be fulfilled by us giving them the opportunity when the governor signed this bill into action. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I withdraw my bill to vote in the affirmative.
Mr. Ortiz in the affirmative. Mr. Cancel.